Hello, this is Tracy Dix from Wyrd Learning, and welcome to today, day 52 of my conversion card challenge. So today I've got the ripple effect. Although your offer solves one specific problem for your reader, it's powerful to show the ripple effect of change that will happen in your prospect's life when this problem gets solved. Fixing money problems can fix relationship problems. Fixing weight loss problems can help attract that ideal partner. Fixing career problems can lead to better family life, etc. Formula. Answer. How will solving this problem improve other areas of the reader's life as well? Example in action. As you probably already know, over 65% of fights in a marriage are money related. So healing these money blocks once and for all isn't just so you can make more money or buy more stuff, it's so you can experience a higher quality of life with those you care about. So in essay writing, although you might touch on such personal situations like marriage and family life and personal finances, you won't phrase it in quite the same way, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you this by now. But basically, when you're exploring an idea in terms of cause and effect, it's a good idea to then ripple out and think about what other effects it can have. I believe that very often when students are presenting an argument, they want to be able to present ideas in a very tidy sort of way. And this is a misconception because actually a mature argument will be able to take into account the fact that life and knowledge is pretty messy, multidimensional, and quite complicated. And so it would present a more sophisticated argument if you're able to kind of consider lots of other variables and then kind of sum it up in terms of, well, what does that tell us then about, how kind of one thing leads to another. So I'm going to take today's example from the field of economics. It's actually quite a long time since I've thought of economics because I last studied it at A level. But one of the things I do remember is supply and demand. So the thinking in economics is when demand for a commodity increases, supply decreases relatively, and obviously price increases as well because that commodity becomes scarce with more demand for it. So there you've got three variables already, so beginning with supply and demand, and then that affects price. But then when you think about exactly what commodity it is, so let's take, for example, during COVID times, restaurants were told to close for business completely to enable social distancing, which meant that the supply in terms of opportunities to eat out was eradicated completely. Now, this is kind of complicated, and those of you who are economists might be able to advise me a little bit better on this, and I'm really happy to go into a discussion because I find, this really interesting. But basically, when supply is eradicated completely like that, I guess, first of all, you don't really get to see the demand. But on rare occasions where, pubs were allowed to open for a couple of weeks or a few days, and there were reports in the media about queues of people on the streets waiting for the pubs to open, you could see that removing that supply led to this surge in demand because people had this desire to go out that had been kind of pent up into frustration, over time, especially if it means that they were unable to keep up their regular habits of eating out or going to a pub and things like that. So another variable you could introduce within this dynamic is then the idea of takeaways or delivery services, like Just Eat and Deliveroo and stuff. So during that period, with restaurants being ordered to close because people weren't allowed to be close to each other, was there a surge in demand and supply of food delivery services and takeaway? And do also consider what the differences would have been between each one and in as nuanced a way as you can. So the thing is, there may have been demand for takeout, but at the same time, that would have been a lot more complex because, you'd have to go into a shop to get your takeaway. And if people were social distancing, that means that businesses had to put measures in place to ensure safety of their patrons and of their staff. Whereas perhaps with delivery, those interactions were minimized, and so that would have another kind of knock on effect in terms of the supply and demand beyond just consumer desire. So there were other factors in play in terms of what businesses had to achieve in terms of social distancing and safe practice. So it's a good idea to just play around with these ideas a little bit, and you can take inspiration from your own personal experience as well, because many of us would have kind of seen what happened. And with a topic like this, looking at kind of opinion pieces on what consumers say about how certain establishments maintain good social distancing or don't maintain it is quite a nice way of gathering some qualitative data on the topic, because it gives you those value-based judgments on what things were really like beyond the quantitative data, which is all about the statistics and the figures. So take, for example, a restaurant down the road from me decided to introduce, they completely overturned things, and I don't know if they were actually doing a delivery service, but they were doing a kind of drive-in service, almost like a sort of drive-in movie kind of scenario. There weren't any films showing or anything, but the idea was that patrons could go to the restaurant and sit in the car park, and they did up the car park really nicely with big signs saying which kind of parking bay number you were in, and with lovely kind of lights outside, so the atmosphere looked quite attractive. So the idea was, people would kind of sit in the car and have their meal as if they were like at some kind of a drive-through film experience, which I suppose is kind of a novel approach. And what this restaurant had basically identified was that many of their patrons do drive quite flashy cars. And driving their flashy car to the restaurant where to be seen was all part of the experience for their patrons. So the restaurant took this into account and adapted the kind of takeout culture and adapted, the kind of delivery culture, and came up with something completely different that would appeal to their customer base. So depending on how you're sort of framing this kind of argument, if you're looking at a case study, you would want to kind of narrow in on specific businesses in order to kind of demonstrate what you mean by in terms of practices and certain business models. Whereas if you're looking at overall trends, then you want more examples to, for example, prove that there was a surge in demand for food delivery services or for takeaways. And, obviously then you'd have to kind of find the data to back it up, whatever those sources might be. So if you want me to go into any more detail about what you can explore when it comes to these topics, do let me know in the comments or DM us and let me know, and I'll come back to it later on. So I hope this was a useful discussion for today, and do join me again for day 53 tomorrow. That's the second last card, so we're nearly there in this challenge.